Festival. You are listening to SGFR, podcast radio for the festival. Now broadcasting highlights and top picks, your tasty, tantalizing tease for this coming year.
Can I take us on to 10 Candles? We've had people talk about 10 Candles before, but I know it's a little bit, I could be wrong here, but I associate it with you. It's a little bit of what I'd call a specialty of yours, the kind of whole premise
definitely.
of it. Please, could you give us a summary of the introduction to 10 Candles?
Sure. So the thing I always preface it with is it is tragic horror and everyone dies by the end. So don't go into it with a character that you're particularly attached to because they won't survive. It's played in complete darkness by the light of 10 tea lights and a fire.
Yeah.
And the basic premise is 10 days ago, the world went dark. 5 days ago, they appeared. And you're now on day 0 and telling the story of what your characters are doing. You know you won't survive. There is no surviving this. But what moments of hope and exploration and joy can you find in this awful, awful situation? So the first time I played it it's got to be about 10 years ago now. Simon, Mr. Strange of Strange Games, ran it for a bunch of us in his flat one night, sat around the dining table with a bunch of tea lights in the middle of the table. And it was the creepiest, most delightful thing I'd ever played. So prior to that, all my experience with RPGs have been D&D and big, long-form scenarios and games that go on for months or years at a time. And to have this little super intense experience that went on for 3 or 4 hours and had, again, I like my games to fit into a nice chunk of time, come to a nice ending, but for the players to tell a story on the way. And there are very few dice rolls. A lot of it is about what you want to do and how you want to do it, and whether you as the player get to narrate it or whether I as the GM get to narrate it, and whether you fail or succeed at what you're doing. And my absolute favourite bit of the game is the truth-telling. So the way you define the world between you. I write a scenario that kind of gives an overarching thing for the world, but how you define the world as a group goes something like this. So each player at the beginning of a round says, these things are true. And then you go around and you say a truth. And then each of those things defines something new about the world. And each of those things, you can't contradict something else. You can only build on it, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the round, everyone says, but we're still alive. And as you put candles out, fewer and fewer people get to tell the truth. So it's as many truths as there are candles.
Yes.
And then when the last candle goes out, the GM says, these things are true, the world is dark. And the game ends in darkness because you just put your last light out.
Yeah.
And it could be utterly terrifying. I tend to run mine as more creepy, slightly mythological, slightly magical, but it's one of those experiences that I ran it the first time at the first big festival that I came to, and I've run it every time since because it's so much fun to run and it's so much fun to creep the players out and pit them against each other and against the darkness and against what lurks in the darkness and see what people do when their characters are on the very edge of survival and just existence in general. It's
and that pitting players and DM and scenario against each other is a very powerful part of the game, certainly my experience of it. And in that saying this thing is true, I can remember trying to say a single true statement that would benefit us in some way, that would somehow give us a much needed and utterly inevitably futile attempt to, as you say, survive, to not only survive but maybe bring some joy, maybe some hope, maybe that there is some sort of sustenance or resource available that we can still use, or there's a booster, or some sort of morale booster, or something from as simple and as abstract as that there is still love in the world, or even something as pragmatic as the engine on our car still works.
Or we found some extra batteries for the torches.
Yeah.
I think my other favorite thing about it is you build your characters as a group at the beginning of the game, and one of the parts of that is that the players to either side of you define characteristics of your character, and also you define a wish for your character that will give you hope, but one of the players to one side of you defines your brink, which is the awful, terrible thing you will do at the end of everything to try and survive for another hour.
Wow.
And this awful thing that they've seen you do. And so one player and you know about that, and they know about this awful thing that you've done. So it can be anything from like you stole the last of someone's food to you outright murdered someone.
Yes.
But there's this dark secret to every single character that one other person knows about, and it might not ever come up, but it might. And so all of these characters have a hope and a light in them, but they also have those depths that they can go to, and that you're kind of pushed towards going to. So you're not just exploring the heroes like you might in D&D or Pathfinder. You're exploring a more rounded human character where you will do terrible things to survive if you need to.
To me, it's fascinating, and this, like quite a lot of RPG games, is a vehicle for this act of communal storytelling, of story creation. And I kind of love that. So there you are, we're sat together, and from what you're describing, we're describing certain hidden character traits that are going to color everything, and in that collective thing, as well as the building of the world around. I really like I'm scrabbling for the word. It's in the subtlety and the ambiguity of saying they, unspecified, have arrived. So we don't know what the impending doom is, what the impending danger is.
When you're defining the brink, so the GM defines the brink for one player, which means one player defines something about them.
Yeah.
There's one known fact that one person knows about, and it's given to the GM, and they have to kind of incorporate it in. But to everyone else, they're just a noise in the dark or a deeper shadow without any knowledge of what they are. And you can, as a GM, bring them in and they start interacting with the players, or they can remain this shadow in the shadows, kind of chasing and hunting your players. And it's really interesting playing with the difference of that, and how one person knows something about them, and whether they share that with the other players or they keep that to themselves is really interesting.
One of the other places I've experienced that was playing a game of Call of Cthulhu Orient Express. And I played a character who was touched by the madness, and in that insanity saw a zombie rise up and blasted the zombie away with a double-barreled shotgun, which he had legally because he was a policeman. But the other characters realized that what the person saw was not actually a zombie, was just an innocent old bloke who was getting up a little bit from an afternoon nap in the right sort of light and circumstance. So my character just accidentally murdered someone in cold blood, and the rest are going around. And it took me about 3 more sessions to realize that was their perception. It was kind of like, You did what? It's
Yeah.
so
This differing perception thing is really interesting to play with.
Now, you've run this game a fair number of times. I have to ask this question, having you knowing that you've gone with quite a few people on their journey towards the end of the world. How's your faith in humanity now?
My faith in the specific weird bit of humanity that I play games with is great.
Good.
My faith in humanity in general, maybe not so much. I think the thing that gives me faith in humanity off the back of this game is that people come and play with me. Like, every year, there are two or three people that play every year.
Yeah.
And so they must have some faith that one day they're going to survive. One day, I'm going to go, oh, no, okay, you found the trick. Like, you live this time. Because they keep coming back.
Yes.
Like, they know they're going to die. And yet they keep coming back. It's wild.
It's wild. I would. 10 Candles is pretty popular. I hear about it a fair amount. So if you're not running it, then or even if you are, and there's not the room for you to for someone to join you, there will be other games available very likely, and I recommend it. I do invite people to hunt down a game with 10 Candles and join in. In fact, I will be looking to do that as well come the festivals.
Yeah.
Kiri, that's wonderful. I'm mindful of the time because I know you've got stuff to do. And thank you so much for joining me here. That was a wonderful conversation. All three of those
really
were fascinating. Yeah.
You've been listening to SGFR, the podcast radio channel for the Strange Games Festival.
This season's hosts have been James, Laura, Andy, and Craig.
And if you'd like to come on the show, message us on the Festival Radio channel on the Strange Games Festival Discord server.